we've had Manasseh Azuri Awune, we've had the Venerable Joyce Bawa Mokhtari, we've had Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa here before, and many others to speak to our students on issues that they would face when they get out of this place. Some few weeks ago, when I did announce to this class that our advertised guest lecturer had been rescheduled, many of you came up to me after the class expressing your disappointment and saying that you were ready to meet our guest lecturer today. In Dagari, there's a proverb that late cooking does not mean going to bed hungry. We are still going to have our guest lecturer today, and we are going to eat belly full, and maybe in some cases without haircut. So, the norm is that usually I'll be the one to introduce our guest lecturer for the class, as you may have noticed in several weeks. But just like John the Baptist in our Advent story in the Bible, today's guest lecturer, I'm not even fit enough to untie his shoes. So I would ask that we put our hands together and welcome the president of the University College, Professor Fred McBagon-Lurie, to do that.
Good morning, ACT. Good morning. You know, I'm usually not a nervous man, but I'm so excited I feel nervous. I see some really familiar faces here that I would like to acknowledge. Ms. Mokhtari, I've known her forever, since we were kids, and we are still kids. Thank you so much for your support. I have my guests here this morning, and I'm honored that they stayed to meet, should I say that, our soon-to-be President of the Republic. You just need to keep your Twitter accounts open just in case. I have lawyer Francis Ajari here. I have Mr. Sambed. Could you stand and be recognized? Mr. Sambed is a businessman from California who made it all the way to help us set up a bio-innovation center in Ghana. I have Dr. Telma Asari, who is a gynecologist and also part of the team. I just told her this morning, anytime I look at her, I look at my 3 daughters and feel proud that there's a future for them. I have Professor Lee Makowski. Thank you. I have my able-bodied strategy. Don't let his youth fool you. He gets work done. Please, Mr. Variani. I think I got your name earlier, but it escaped me, Mr. Danso. Mr. Danso Bafo. Okay. Professor Danso Bafo, thank you for coming. I have Mr. David Gowu, who has worked so tirelessly to bring ICT standardization to Ghana. My able-bodied admissions director, Akusia Magi. My finance guy is hiding. These are difficult times for finance officials. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have the unique privilege of introducing to you a man that you all know very well. He doesn't need any introduction. Undoubtedly, the most qualified person to have ever been president of this republic. Did you hear that? He has served as an assemblyman, an MP, a deputy minister, a minister, a vice president, a president-in-waiting, a president, a former president, and soon to be a president. How blessed can you be? From the humble beginnings in Bole to the highest offices of this country. I never cease telling you guys, great things can start small. So today, Academic City is privileged to welcome his presence here to this course that you all know is close and dear to me. The destiny of this country is in somebody's hands in this room. You've all seen the challenges we've seen in the last 6 years and continue to experience. Sometimes you don't know what you have until you've lost it. So today, let's hear from the lion's own mouth. Your Excellency, your audience awaits. Thank you.
Thank you. Please be seated. Thank you very much. President, faculty, students, I'm very pleased to be with you. But first, let me apologize for the fiasco the last time. I was set to come and interact with you, and then I got an emergency call to leave the country, and so I had to make that trip. And so I promised the president of your college that definitely I will make it. I'll fix a time and come. And today we've had the opportunity of being here. Let me say how I'm excited to see all your young faces. It transports me back to my time in university myself. At the time we didn't have university colleges like yours. All the universities we had in Ghana were public universities. And so you either had to go to University of Science and Technology or University of Ghana, Legon, or Cape Coast University. I think those were the three existing universities. Of course, I attended University of Ghana, and I'm a Vandal. I was in Commonwealth Hall. And so I'm giving you all the confessions. I'm supposed to talk about leadership and decision-making, especially at decisive moments. And if you read my book, my first coup d'etat, at the end of the book, there is a reminiscence about when I was young. I was riding a bicycle down a hill, and we knew the bicycle didn't have brakes, but yet you know how kids are. My elder brother went successfully and managed to arrive safely. The next one went, and I said I was going to try too. And it's down a slope, and there's a main road at the end. And so I climbed the bicycle from the top of the hill, and it started gathering speed. By the time I got to where I should turn, you were supposed to make a sharp turn, and do that kind of style that you do. The bicycle was moving so fast that I was frightened to turn. And if I didn't turn, I was likely to go into the main road, and a passing car could hit me and kill me. I had to make a decision. Either go to the main road and die, or turn somehow and cause less damage. And so even though I couldn't turn into the curve that I was supposed to turn, I turned and ran into a milk bush. And I came out with scratches all over my body. But definitely, I had to take a decision, and I did take a decision at a decisive moment. And that probably accounts for my being here today, alive, and being able to talk to you. So decision-making occurs in life, at every stage. In your life as a student, when you leave as a leader of a students' movement. I was secretary to the SRC in Legon, and we had to take decisions several times on many major issues to do with advocacy. We were in school in the late 90s and 80s, and in the late 70s and 80s, I left University of Ghana in 1981. And if you remember that time, those were the revolutionary times, and Ghana was in a lot of turbulence. And so our student leaders and as chief advocates for the student body, we had to take decisions on sometimes going on demonstrations, advocating for different things. I noticed that now we, in the student movement, are more concerned about our domestic issues. But in those days, we're very, broad-minded in terms of the things we did advocacy for, not only domestically, but also internationally. And so we marched to call for freedom for Nelson Mandela. We marched to condemn the apartheid government. We marched to call on America to raise the blockade on Cuba. I mean, the kinds of courses that we undertook were quite international, but of course, we also marched to condemn government's human rights abuses. And I remember one of our students was killed during a demonstration at Jebewa, and we really had to lead the student movement to show how much we abhorred, that reckless killing of the student. And so we went on a rampage. They closed the campus for some time, and eventually we came back. But these are some of the things that prepare you for leadership in future. And I'll say that I cut my teeth in terms of leadership as a student leader, because before I came to university, I was a bit introverted. I was not very outgoing, and even though I'd been a prefect for the kind of leadership that I found when I went to the university. But if you notice, a lot of our young people, the Joyces of this world, Ablakwas, Haruna Idrisus, and all of them, who today are in positions of political leadership, cut their teeth on student leadership. They had the experience of leading SRCs, NUCs, and all that, and that prepared them for President Bush has a book, Decision Points. I think that would be a good reference to read after this interaction. It will give you further information about some of the decision points he reached that he had to take action on something, including the decision for America to invade Iraq. He explains the information that he got based on which he took that decision. So leadership is about responsibility first and decision making. You must accept responsibility for the position that you occupy. And once you are the leader, people look up to you to take responsibility, and based on that responsibility, take leadership, take decisive action or decisions. You cannot take proper decisions when you've not accepted responsibility for taking those decisions. And that's why, in many cases, and I'll come to that when we suffered the energy crisis, I had to go to Parliament and take responsibility for it, even though it was a legacy problem, and then take the firmest actions to resolve it. But my experience with decision-making at the national level started when I became Minister of Communications. We were given the responsibility to deregulate the telecom sector. I'm sure most of you don't know what it used to be. We used to have P&T, Post and Telecommunications Corporation, and it was a state-owned monopoly that was in charge of all telecommunications services. And so if you wanted to make a call, you had to go to the post office, and they will go. I'm sure most of you haven't seen dial phones before. Now you just have touch screens and all that. And they'll go crap, 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 and then yes, and then the other person answers at the other end, and then they'll ask you to go into a booth and go and pick the phone there, and then you can talk to whoever it is. For international calls, you have to come to Accra, High Street. There's a place called High Street where P&T had their main international exchange. And so if you had a relative outside and you wanted to talk to them, you had to go to High Street, and they'll call international, and then you can speak to them. Today, it is wonderful to see how far we've come. But it took firm decisions to be able to reach that point. Nobody likes change. People are comfortable in the conditions in which they are. And so you are in a certain comfort zone, and you don't want to get out of it. And so when we decided to deregulate the telecom industry, we came against a very strong pushback, especially from the staff and management of the existing P&T. Our first assignment was to break the Post and Telecommunications into two separate entities. The first one was the Ghana Post that you know today, and the second one was the Ghana Telecom, which today is Vodafone. At that time, it became Ghana Telecom. And so the workers and management, their management joined them, threatened all kinds of mayhem. And we were told that Post was such a, telecoms was such a sensitive area that it must be managed by the state. If you allow the private sector to come in, it will compromise the security of our telecommunications, and the CIA will be listening to our conversations, and so on and so forth. I mean, today we'll look back and laugh, but at the time, these were serious concerns that were raised. And so one had to take a decision to either put our foot down and go into uncharted waters, which is exactly what we did. And so we went ahead, we divided the two corporations, and then we also advertised to have new entrants coming, new telecom companies, which were private sector led, to come into the telecom space. It was unheard of in Africa. Ghana was one of the first to do it. South Africa was first, Ghana was second. And so the first company that came in was called Scancom, which today is MTN. And you know how much they paid for the license? $500,000, that's all. And they got a mobile license to provide mobile telephony. No, actually, Celtel came in first. Celtel was local owned, but it had a very small subscriber base. And then afterwards, Mobitel came. Mobitel came with a very big, you should have seen the first mobile phones. They really were like yams. I mean, huge, you know. And at the time, they used to call them Mijnabontin America, say, because we were used to the house phone, which was connected by wire. And so if you wanted somebody to know that you were using a mobile phone, you say, oh, Mijnabontin America, say, I just say, you are a mobile phone holder. And that was an elite club, very few of them. And then Scancom came, paid $500,000, and they got the first GSM license. GSM was a new technology that had come, on which most of the mobile phones you have today are riding. And so it was a very tough decision to let these private sector players come in. But it was the entry of the private sector players that changed the whole of the telecom and IT space. And today now, if you look, you see the kind of broadband data you have, you know, all the various applications, software, everything you have today. It came from those decisive moments that we're taking to deregulate the sector and allow the private sector in. Because of course, the private sector comes in with a lot of innovation. Now, aside from that, I served as vice president and president. And that is where the real gravity of decision-making comes. Because whatever decision you take impacts somebody or other in a certain way. And so, as vice president and president, you have certain bodies that assist you with decision-making. And the first one I'll talk about is the National Security Council. The National Security Council is a council made up of all service commanders, and it's got other members, the Minister of Interior and other people there. And it's got the BNI. I hear they've changed it to NIB now. And all these, the National Security Council, all of them have a responsibility to feed the president with up-to-date, valid information in decision-making. And so if you go to every district, you have a national security officer there, you have a BNI officer there. He gathers data on everything that is happening in the country, in every district, and he forwards it to the National Security Council Secretariat. And so the president has a national security briefing every Monday morning, first thing. And you are told what is happening in every part of the country. That is to keep you abreast with what is happening. They give you the intel so that if you have to take any decisions, you have the relevant information to be able to do that. The president gets the briefing, the vice president too gets the briefing. And so the National Security Council is one of the important bodies that helps the president in terms of providing him with the relevant intel and information to be able to take decisions that are well informed. And then you have the Council of State, which is an advisory body. They meet the president once a year. And what they do is they raise many issues that are going on within the country. And they raise them with the president. They listen to the president. At the end of it, they have a report where they give advice on decisions they think the president should take or things that are not going so well. And so the president needs to take decisions to rectify whatever it is. So you have bodies like that to help assist you in terms of decision making. Then one of the most important ones is your cabinet. Cabinet meets every 2 weeks. There are so many decisions that have to be taken in terms of policy, in terms of the economy, in terms of education, health, just name it, as many as you have sectors. And the president alone cannot sit and just be fed with all these things and take decisions on all of them. And so every 2 weeks, he has a cabinet of his ministers who join him, sit down, and they bring cabinet, they call them cabinet briefs. So they bring cabinet briefs on various things, decisions that need to be made in terms of policy. And so there's a discussion. The president heads the cabinet. He's chair of the cabinet, so he moderates it. And so there's a discussion, you allow a discussion, you take it, agenda items one by one, and you allow a thorough discussion, you know, on the issue. And then at the end of it, the onus lies on the president to make the decision on what he thinks the decision should be after having listened to all his cabinet ministers. And so when that is done, it is recorded as a decision of cabinet. You know, it's a decision of the president, but it's a cabinet decision. Then you have other bodies like the Economic Advisory Team, and that one focuses just on the economy. In some cases, you call it the Economic Management Team. And it must be a solid team. You need a solid team. I don't know about this current one. But where they have led us, I wonder about their solidity. You know, so the Economic Management Team, convention now makes it headed by the vice president. But the president is supposed to be the chair of the Economic Management Team, but recently it's been delegated to the vice president. It started from President Rawlings' time. Rawlings was a soldier, and he didn't have time for these technical arguments and all the niceties about policy making and all that. So luckily he had a technocrat as his vice president, who was Professor Evans Atta Mills. So he made Professor Mills chair the Economic Management Team. And so when Professor Mills became president, he also asked me to chair the Economic Management Team. So as vice president, I chaired the Economic Management Team. And I think President Akufo-Addo too has made his vice president, Dr. Bawumia, chair the Economic Management Team. But this is a team that meets once a month, you know, and the team has the finance minister, the governor of the Bank of Ghana, some learned economists and all that as part of the team. And what they do is they get a report on the state of the economy, and they advise on what should be done in terms of decision making with the economy. So for instance, this decision to go to the IMF agreements, that is what government agrees to, will go to the Economic Management Team, and it will be finalized by the Economic Management Team. Then it goes to the president. And this is the advice of the Economic Management Team to the president. But eventually the decision to enter into the staff agreement with the IMF will be the decision of the president, but upon advice of committees like this. Apart from that, the president can set up ad hoc committees to help him in decision making. In our local language, they say, etrikro and kwejina, or something like that. or it could be that Nyansa ni Obakufo team, or in English they say 2 heads are better than 1. So in many cases of decision making, even though you take the eventual decision, you want to make sure that you share as many views as possible and get as much good advice and information as possible before you go ahead and take that decision. Now, I'll give you several decision points that I faced when I was president. And the first one was the energy crisis. Some of you must have been very little at the time, but you remember Doomsaw. Doomsaw was a legacy problem. For many years, our demand for energy was growing by 12% a year. We're consuming 12% more energy every year. Unfortunately, previous governments, they were not putting in generation at the pace at which demand was rising, because you must forecast demand and then you must put in the generation to match the demand as it grows. Unfortunately, for several years, no new power plant was put up to meet the demand. And it all came to a head when I became president. I was so unfortunate, When I became president, one of the thermal plants in Takoradi broke down, and it took out almost 200 megawatts from the system. But at the time, our demand had outpaced the supply. And so once this one went down, we had to start power rationing. It meant that you'll be on for this period, then you go off, another place comes on. They call it load shedding. The technical name for it is load shedding. And so they started load shedding. And so I'm sure all of you, when you were kids at home, when the lights go off, you helped your parents to shout, "Oh, Mahama." But you see how unfair it is. Today when the lights go, you say, "Oh, ECG for somehow doing." But that time, if the lights went off, it was the president. But I mean, those are the hazards of leadership, and I accepted them in my stride. And so I had to go to Parliament. It was a State of the Nation address. And I said, this is the problem we're faced with. I analyzed the problem and everything. One of the things you must do as a leader in taking decisions is not to shift blame. It's to accept responsibility. It's when you've accepted responsibility that you have the platform and the courage with which to deal with the problem. And so I had to go take responsibility. I said, look, it's a legacy problem. Our generation is not matching up. But I was elected for a time like this, and so I'll fix it. And so I set up an emergency committee to deal with the crisis. And we met weekly. And the crisis was in 2 parts. It was a problem of generation and also a financial problem. The few independent power producers we had, we were not generating enough money from our electricity tariffs to be able to pay them for the power they were supplying. And so, very fantastic team. We brought all the leaders of the power utilities together and brought some experts in the energy sector together. And we met weekly. And I'm happy to say that we mobilized almost 500 megawatts of power in the shortest possible time ever recorded in Africa. Because in a period of I read the State of the Nation address in February. In a period of 9 months after February, we had the Ameri power plants producing power, and we had the car power plant, which is a floating power barge. It was anchored and also producing power. So we solved the generational part. And so now it was left to the financial part. And so we came up with the concept of the energy sector levy. You've heard of ESLA. And so ESLA was supposed to generate additional revenues, which we used to pay some of the legacy debts from the energy, the independent power producers, and then also to pay off the BDCs who had been supplying petroleum that we were owing. And so that happened. Today, that ESLA has been mortgaged by this government. We've taken the money in advance and spent it and collateralized it till 2035. And so till 2035, when we finish paying off, those revenues have been mortgaged. But because we're going into an IMF program, it is likely that in the debt restructuring, IMF will count ESLA as part of the public debt. And if they do, then it means that it will be treated as part of the debt operation. And if that is done, it will free up the ESLA monies probably to be used to do exactly what they were meant to do, to pay off the shortfall in energy debt. The other decisions we took, like converting the polytechnics to technical universities, and that one, Nana Jane was my chief advisor in charting that course. There were a lot of people who were not for it, you know, and said that polytechnics must remain polytechnics. But we're having a problem with placement of polytechnic students, especially when they did their program called the HND. And so it was a decision we had to take. Fortunately, Cabinet was available. Nana, who had been the first female vice chancellor of University of Cape Coast, was very well apprised of the problem. And so we were able to take decisions about it. One of the very important aspects of decision-making for presidents is dealing with corruption. It's not as easy as you think it is. And sometimes the person who's been involved in corruption is somebody that you know very well, and probably somebody who's been a member of your team. But unfortunately, he's falling, you know, by the wayside. You have to gather the courage and boldness to deal with it, to serve as a deterrent to everybody that, look, if it comes to this, I will take action. You know, unfortunately, that's part of the problem we're facing today, that one, the president cannot sack people who have been accused of corruption and so on and so forth. I faced one particular one, I won't mention the name, but for those of you who remember, there had been a procurement that had taken place, and the minister had not gone through the procurement processes properly. And as a result of that, there was an accusation that the cost of the procurement was far above, you know, what it should be. And it created a major scandal for government. And so I asked the Attorney General at the time, Marita Bruapia Opong, and the Chief of Staff to investigate the allegations. And they did, and they brought a report. The report, you know, confirmed that the procurement process was not gone through properly, and that there was the possibility that the deal was overpriced by about 1 million and something cedis. And so when the report came, I called the minister involved, and I said, unfortunately, this report is not favorable to you at all. And so I have to give you the option to either tender your resignation letter or I'll have to dismiss you. And she tendered her resignation letter. There was somebody very dear to me and very close to me, but I mean, we had to take the decision when we had to take it. And so taking such decisive actions on your colleagues, your comrades, you know, I mean, like the president of this university, if something goes amiss or somebody is involved in something, a scandal or something that it shouldn't be, he'll have to gather the courage, you know, to either fire you or suspend you or something, because these are decisions that need to be made in order that governance in a society or in a university or in a country would continue to go properly. And so there's another case in which I ordered a commission of inquiry into another scandal that had taken place. And eventually the report came. And indicted one of my friends. It was a member of parliament with me. I'd been in parliament with him. And the Attorney General came out with a report and said, unfortunately, she would have to prosecute that person. And so she needed my permission to go ahead. And I said, go ahead. And so she did. And he was convicted and served a prison sentence. Recently, he was pardoned by the current president, on health grounds. But these are some of the decision points that we have had to take. Others are reshuffle of ministers. You have to, after a while, take a look at the performance of your ministers. And based on the performance, you must decide to drop some people, and you can also decide to shift some people to other places. They are probably good, but they are not finding their feet in the ministry you send them. And so after observing them for a year or two, you see that, look, this person will do better here because of these qualities he has. And so you move him there and you bring somebody else. Aside from that, sometimes you take decisions to move people because you don't want them to create kingdoms in the ministries in which they are. When the staff of a ministry or an agency know that this person is untouchable, then it does not bring out the best in them, because they know, well, he's going to be there forever, and so even if he's doing the wrong thing, we can't say it, and it becomes like a fiefdom. And this is what is happening today. There are some of the ministers who treat the ministry like it's their property and that they brought it from wherever their hometowns are, and that they are the monarchs of all the survey in the ministry. And so they keep everybody, in fear of them. Do you know, me and the president used to play, you people don't know gutter to gutter. When we were young, the street, there's one gutter here, there's one gutter here. And when there are no cars coming, we'll put 2 stones, and then we'll get a ball, and then we play between the 2 gutters. And so we call it gutter to gutter. So if me and president were children together, we played gutter to gutter. We went hunting with catapults. I'm sure you people don't know what a catapult is. We climbed trees to eat mangoes. How many of you have climbed trees before? We climbed trees to eat mangoes and all kinds of things. So some people have known the president since, the point I'm just trying to make is that some people have known the president since they were children together. You understand? So somebody like that ends up in a ministry and he feels he owns it. And he says, hey, when me and the president were playing gutter to gutter, where were you? And so they might be taking the wrong decisions, but because the president doesn't have the courage to move them, then it becomes a problem. I, in my time, reshuffled some ministers, and I know they were not pleased with it. Of course, nobody is pleased when you drop him from office. And so there are a few of them who are not my best friends anymore because I dropped them from office, So that happens. One of the most difficult decisions I took was the decision to go to the IMF in 2014. We were having some problems with stability of the economy, caused partly by the energy crisis that I talked about, Doomso. Then apart from that, we had started implementing a program called the Single Spine Pay Policy, which started when I was vice president. And so we had negotiated with labor. And by 2012, we had agreed on the pay policy. We had been advised by the Ministry of Finance that it was going to be revenue neutral. It meant that we will do the adjustments on the pay policy, but it won't lead to an increase in the overall amount of money we'll have to pay. Unfortunately, by the time we had finished these adjustments in 2012, and we started paying the arrears, salaries alone, wages and compensation, were consuming about 73% of total government revenue. And so if you paid 73% of government revenue for salaries and wages alone, and at that time the whole public service was about 600,000 people. So 600,000 people consume 73% of revenue. And then what do you have left? 27 point something percent for everything else, goods and services, capital development and everything. And so and at the same time we had external shocks. We had become a new oil producing country. For those of you who do your research, there was a time when the price of crude oil on the international market fell as low as $38. And so it meant that we're getting virtually nothing from crude. The price of cocoa on the world markets came from $2,200 per ton to $1,200 per ton. The price of gold, collapsed. This was during the world financial crisis. The world went through a financial crisis. And so it meant that for our major exports, we were receiving much less money. And yet we had done a new pay policy that was paying out more as wages and salaries to public sector workers. And so something had to give. We went to a forum we called the Senchi Forum. We invited all Ghanaians, stakeholders, political parties, economists, everybody, students, National Union of Ghana students, everybody, traditional rulers, everybody. And we went and told them, this is the state of the economy. Now we want to know what ideas you all have so that we build a consensus on the policy that we should take. And so we came out with what we call the Homegrown Fiscal Consolidation Program. And so in the next budget, luckily we did the Senchi Forum, it was synthesized before we presented the next budget. So in the next budget, we incorporated all the ideas that we took from the Homegrown Fiscal Consolidation Program. And so we incorporated it, but we realized that the investors and the bilateral donors were reluctant to release funds or to come in because they didn't believe that we could implement the Homegrown Fiscal Consolidation Program. And so I took it to them. I said, look, this is the program we brought. We are cutting expenditure, we're raising revenue, we're going to balance the budget and things. And they'll just look at me and they didn't believe that we could do it. And so they still held on to their investments and the funds until one of them from DFID came to me and said, look, these guys are not going to invest or release any of the funds unless you go into an IMF program, because they don't believe that you can implement it. So it meant that they needed the IMF as a headmaster to come and stand and supervise your work like your lecturers do and mark, your work as you progress, It was a hard decision to take because going to the IMF is not the easiest thing to do. And so I called an advisory council. It had Kwame Pienim, Kwesi Botwe, Dr. Joabe, if I remember many of them, Nana Oyemansa. It had the governor at the time, Wampa. It had the Minister of Finance, Tekwe, and others. I called them into a room and I said, look, we need to take a decision on this. Of course, they thought that the IMF option would not be palatable to me. So they came with some long, winding, advice. I mean, I couldn't see the head or tail of it, And so when eventually they finished, I went and joined them, and they read through the reports that they were giving me. And I said, oh, but I thought we were going to go to the IMF. They said, oh, we thought you'd be angry if we advised that. I said, no, we don't have any option. Let's do it. And so that evening, the statement was drafted, and we informed the nation that, look, we're going to go into an IMF program. And that became the Extended Credit Facility, ECF. It was a 3-year program starting in 2015. And of course, I was in office 2015 and 2016. And so the 3rd year came under the new government that succeeded us, under the NPP. They finished the 3rd year. But it was that program that helped to balance out our books, restore macroeconomic stability. But unfortunately, we lost it again by excessive borrowing. As soon as this government came out of the program, they started going on to the Eurobond market for $3 billion, $3 billion, $3 billion, and eventually we all are in the economic ditch that we are. There was another decisive moment that I faced, and that day I remember we were huddled in my office. The whole of the petroleum sector were all the NPA, Petroleum Commission, you know, Energy Ministry, Energy Commission, all of them were there. And we had to take a decision on deregulation of petroleum prices. When you go to buy cement, government doesn't fix the price. When you go to buy Milo, government doesn't fix the price. But unfortunately, the only thing that government was continuing to control the price was petroleum products. And what happened was government did not have the courage to sell it at the full market value. So we're bringing petroleum prices at a certain cost. You go bring a petroleum in at, say, $100, and then you come and sell it at $50. Somebody has to pay for it. I mean, it's a debt that is there. And to pay for it, it has to come out of your taxes, you know. And so we had to take a decision on deregulation. And so I asked for advice, and they said, there were two factions. One faction came and said, no, if you deregulate, it's going to push up the prices suddenly by a certain amount. It was a very frightening amount. At that time, it was, before we left off, it was 14 cedis to the gallon. This time it was around 10 cedis or something, you know. And they came and said, the day we announce petroleum price deregulation, the price is going to jump to 20 cedis, double. Of course, I was frightened, because if the price doubled, TUC and co were not going to leave me in peace. Already, I was one of the most harassed presidents by organized labor. That is what led to the dead goat syndrome, the statement about dead goat syndrome. Let me digress and talk about dead goat syndrome. And that one is not about this decision making. Because of a single spine, there was a lot of agitation, because when you place police here, then another security distance, let's say fire service, will say, oh, but why are the police earning more than us? You know, then you put nurses here, then doctors said, no, nurses have come too close to us. We must maintain the distance between us and nurses. Then you put local government service workers here, then civil servants will say, hey, why are the local government people getting this? We are not getting. And so I was confronted with mass, you know, labor unrest. I'm the only president in the Fourth Republic where all organized labor came together and went on strike and shut down the country, you know. And so it had been going on for some time. Doctors went on strike, nurses went on strike, laboratory technicians went on strike, pharmacists went on strike, teachers went on strike, you know. And so I went to Botswana on a state visit. And anywhere I went as president, I met the Ghanaian community. And so I met the Ghanaian community, and we were talking. They were asking questions about Ghana and all that. And I'm overshooting my time here. Okay, I have only 10 minutes more. Don't worry, I'll try and summarize. And somebody asked me about labor unrest and all that. So I was talking about, I'd come up with a principle. I said, look, if it's not in the budget, I'll not pay it. And so I told them, I said, any demand you want as a labor union, make sure that before the budget is passed, you agitate and have it included in the budget. Once the budget is approved by Parliament, we all must have the discipline of living by it. And then I went to noon and went and added, I said, anyway, I've been the most striked against president, so I've developed the dead goat syndrome. Because when you kill a goat, you can't frighten it with a knife again, you know. Really? I don't know why I said that, but then they, of course, our opponents took it and said, you see, he says it's a dead goat. On fi Ghana for monye na mobeye also you're going for how do you say it? They said I said I'm Ojuanfunu. So Ghanaians can complain, I won't mind them. But I mean, they of course took it out of the context in which I said it. So really, I I have 10 minutes more. Let me see how to apply the rest of the time. I was going to talk about international decision-making at the international level, but I'll do it very briefly. There are two other points. One, as a leader of a country, you have to take decisions at the international level, especially when your country gets appointed to the UN Security Council. There are emergencies and other things that come up that have to be discussed. And as a nation, your foreign minister or your UN representative are the ones who sit in the meeting, but they have to take the direction from the president. They'll give you their advice, and then you tell them, you know, what to do. So for instance, let me just give you an example. Ukraine, Russia. It's gone before the UN Security Council several times. And Ghana is on the, indeed, this month, I think Ghana is chairing the UN Security Council. And so it means that any issue that comes up in the UN Security Council, you must take a stand and a decision. And often it's the president who must give the direction where that decision should be. And Ukraine is your friend, Russia is your friend. But you must decide, you know. And so these issues come up from time to time at that level. Also, I mean, we're friends of Cuba, we're friends of America. Anytime I got the floor on the UN General Assembly, I was plain and blunt and decisive. I said, look, the blockade of Cuba is unfair, and that America must lift that blockade and let the Cuban people have their right of self-determination. And so these are some of the decisions you take. But one of the major ones I was confronted with was the Ebola pandemic in West Africa. I was ECOWAS chairman at the time, and Ebola had affected Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia. And there was the fear that it would spread to the other countries. Indeed, there was one case that jumped us and went to Nigeria. And one of our doctors, Dr. Adadevo, who treated that patient, died from Ebola. And so it created a lot of fear and panic. But as ECOWAS chairman, I had the role of leading the sub-region in trying to fight against the pandemic. And so one of the first decisions I made was to call a meeting of health ministers, you know, here in Accra, to come so that we could come to a common strategy on how to deal with the pandemic. Whoosh. I came under attack. Hey, you're inviting health ministers, and the health ministers were coming from Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone. He says, they're going to bring Ebola into the country. I said, but look, if we don't bring them and invite them, we cannot have a common strategy. And we cannot solve it as individual countries. We have to work as a sub-region to be able to defeat Ebola. And so they came, we held a meeting, and we agreed on a common strategy for Ebola. And then I didn't only stop at that. As ECOWAS chair, I had to show solidarity with our suffering countries. So I decided to visit Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea. And again, hey, Okofa Ebola ba. Mahama, yontia semo Okofa Ebola ba. But I went, visited them, you know, consoled them, solidarized with them. And I was going to the UN General Assembly, so I wanted to be able to go and make a case for the world to intervene. And so after I came back from that visit, I went to the UN General Assembly and I made the famous speech that invited the world to come and assist us with Ebola. And there was an immediate response. America, with Obama, you know, brought field hospitals, they brought volunteers, they brought medicines and all that. Norway, Germany, just name them, all the countries. And in Africa, we ourselves also participated. Ghana sent 63 volunteers, nurses, and paramedics from here to the countries that have been affected by Ebola. And they went and joined their colleagues there in the fight against Ebola. And that's how come we were able to overcome it. The last one, and this will be off record because it's still classified, is the maritime boundary issue. We had a problem with our neighbors over where our boundary was because, of course, we had discovered oil and gas close to the boundary. Normally, there's no problem until you discover something, a natural resource. We and Côte d'Ivoire had lived in peace. And then suddenly we discovered oil and gas. Then Cote d'Ivoire said, this boundary line, are you sure this is where it should be? It should rather be like this. And it started a whole dispute on our boundary. And so when companies were exploring, if they went within our shores, but Cote d'Ivoire had redrawn the line this way, then they sent Navy ships to warn them that they've entered their waters. Meanwhile, they're still in Ghanaian waters. And so we had to see how to resolve this issue. The president of Cote d'Ivoire was my good friend, and we and the Ivorians have very good relations, but it got to a point we had tried to resolve it through the Maritime Boundary Commission, and they had met 14 times, and it wasn't going anywhere, and so a decision had to be taken, on resolving it. And so I decided that we should go to the International Law of the Sea. ITLOS is a tribunal that adjudicates, issues of maritime boundary. Upon the advice of a very solid team, Fuicha Kata, Marietta Brewer, Pia Opong, and so many other very good and knowledgeable people. And they said, look, take this decision, and if we go, we'll win the case. And so we filed at ITLOS. Of course, my colleague president was not happy with me at all for doing that. He said, but we could have resolved this amicably. I said, no. I mean, we've met 14 times. We've not been able to resolve it. And we believe in the justice of our cause, and we're sure that ITLOS will rule for us. And actually, at the end of the case, ITLOS ruled that our boundary was the legitimate one. And that's how come we were able to save our oil and gas resources from being taken over by our colleagues. So my younger brothers and sisters, these are the main issues I wanted to bring up. I still am involved in decision making in the position of being a member of the Council of Elders of my political party, and then also an African statesman. I get invited to observe elections and things like that. And in all these things, you still have to continue to take decisions, and you must take them based on information that is relevant and take decisions that will be of benefit to the society or the community in which you are interacting. So I'll end here. Thank you very much. And
thank you very much. So kindly have your seats, please. So as the norm demands after every class, we just take 2 or 3 questions. And because it is the former president, we'll take a maximum of 4 questions today. So yes, and please, just don't do what you do every week. Don't tell me you have 1 question and end up asking 4. So 1 question, 1 student. So let me just have only 4 students for 4 questions. So I'll start from 1, 2, 3, 4, unfortunately. That's what I've done, President. Yes. So I'll start from here.
Okay, thank you. My name is Mano, and please, I want to ask, what do you think about placing state-owned enterprises or companies in private hands?
I can't hear you properly.
Placing state-owned enterprises.
State-owned enterprises.
In private hands. For example, during the national power crisis, if you had placed ECG in private hands, what do you think would have materialized enough? Do you think it would have taken Ghana for it?
So I think there was another hand here.
Please, good afternoon. My name is Victoria Mains. So when you were speaking, you were like, when you were in the position of Minister of Communication, you had to deregulate the very first telecommunication setup and allow the private sector to operate. So I wanted to know how tough was that, and how were you able to cope with the other members of your team who were first opposing your idea? Thank you.
Your Excellency, would you like to take the other two questions, or you deal with these two first?
Should I just take?
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. My name is Kofi George Abwa. Please, Mr. President, from the National Population Council, it has been noted that 73% of our population constitutes the youth. As being a former president of the nation and at your youthful, exuberant moment, what do you think that NYA, YEA, and the Ministry of Youth and Sports are not doing to help the current youth? And what are the prospective solutions that you propose to the country?
That question had A, I.
Hello, my name is Melinda and I'm from Zimbabwe. I know that even though I come from a different country, the issues we face are closely related. So my question is on leadership shocks. I wanted to ask you, how did you overcome the shocks that you faced when you first became like a leader, especially on the national level? Because, and I realized that—
How did we overcome?
How did you overcome the shocks that you faced as a leader on the national level?
Yes.
Because I realized you still ran for presidency like for another term.
Yes.
So I'm really interested to know like what you did, and like how do you still want to do the same thing, even though like you now know some of the things that the general public wouldn't know?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. No, let me commend you. I speak in many fora of young people and schools and universities, and you can tell the quality of the school by the questions the students ask. I think your questions are your questions are A1, and it shows that you listened attentively to everything that I said. Yeah. This debate has gone on for a long time about state-owned enterprises and private enterprises. Let me admit, I'm a left-of-center politician. I'm a socialist. So I believe in a mix of private and state-owned. There are some things the private sector is better at doing, and one of them was the telecommunications sector. There was no reason why the state had monopolized that sector for so long. And you can see how far we've come since the private sector moved in. Another area that is being looked at is the power sector. We've deregulated generation. Before, all power generation was done by VRA, Volta River Authority. Today, you have different power producers producing power for the country. Now, the distributor is state-owned, which is Electricity Company of Ghana. An attempt was made. Indeed, I signed the Millennium Compact when I was president, and the US was going to help us to deregulate the power sector in order to introduce private sector efficiency. And so we're giving some amount of money to do that aspect of it. Unfortunately, by the time we got there, I had left office, and so the new government took it over and handled it in such a messy way that it became a scandal. I'm sure you heard about PDS, where some members of the president's family, people close to the president, were involved in trying to take shares in it and all that. Eventually, I mean, the scandal grew so big that it had to be discarded. And because of that, America withdrew the $190 million that was left, you know, for this deregulation. So it's something that we need to look at again, because ECG as a state-owned enterprise is not able to collect its money efficiently. It needs some private sector injection, because one of the things we need to do is to roll out prepaid meters as quickly as possible. Because if you have a prepaid meter, nobody will come to read your meter and now come and bring a bill and you won't pay and all that. The prepaid meter, it doesn't know anything. When your money finishes, cring, it cash you off. You know? And so I do believe that we must still seek that privatization of the electricity company so that we can inject some more investment into it, because some of that money was going to go to provide more prepaid meters into the system, and also to improve efficiency of collection of bills. So I'm for both, state-owned and a mix of private sector. Then how tough was the deregulation exercise? It was. Today we look back and it looks like it was something that was easy to do, but at the time there was genuine fear that if we allowed the private sector in, it was going to compromise our telecommunications. And so we faced a lot of pushback, you know, especially from the industry players, that is the management and staff of the state-owned monopoly. You know, they went on demonstration, they went on strikes, and so on and so forth. But eventually, we managed to push it through. I'll give credit to our former minister, Edward Salia. He actually started the process. And then after him, Dr. Pio Gabra, who was my minister, I was his deputy, continued. And then when he moved to the Ministry of Education as minister, I was elevated as minister, and so I continued the process of the deregulation, and eventually we have the kind of telecom and IT space that we currently are enjoying. The bulk of our population are young people, that's true. And what do I think about NYA, YEA? You should have added NAPCO and all of them. You see, the thing is, sustainable jobs are created by growth of the economy. When the economy grows, it throws up sustainable jobs because private investors are able to invest, open new jobs, they're able to employ people. There's a limit to how many people government can employ. As I told you, 600,000 people in my time were consuming 73% of total government revenue. And so we put a net freeze on employment when I was president. What it meant was that we employed only as many people as were retiring that year. So if 30,000 people were retiring from the public service, we employed 30,000 new people to replace them. The only exemption was on education and health. But as we speak currently, this government has imposed a total freeze on employment. It's not a net freeze, total freeze. So if they go into an IMF program, it means that for the next 3 years, they're not going to recruit into the public service. And so that means that the private sector must expand to accommodate the hundreds of thousands of young people who are coming onto the job market. For tertiary institutions, every year we have over 100,000 young people completing university and must look for jobs. So what do? Nana Jane, who was my education minister, held a meeting between academia and industry to try to get academia to fashion their course programs to suit what industry is looking for. Because we're still producing so many people in the humanities than the economy can absorb. There are vacancies in the sciences and technology, but we're not producing as many students in those sectors. And so some of our unemployment is structural, that our course programs do not fit what industry is looking for. At any one time, a country must take stock of what are businesses looking for. They're not looking for qualifications in some humanities subjects. And so why don't we encourage more students and admit more students for these courses, because we know that they are more likely to get jobs. So we need to look at how to balance those things out. And then aside from that, entrepreneurship skills. Who says you must come out and be employed by somebody? You can also become an employer. But our universities must equip you with those skills so that when you come up in your field of specialization, you look, what opportunities are there? Where can I find some capital? Where can I start something for myself? And people have come out and had that motivation and have got the appropriate skills to do it, and they have gone into businesses of their own. And today we look at them and we don't understand why they are where they are. You know, but You learn all the skills as an agriculturist in agricultural school, and everybody comes up and wants to work in Ministry of Agriculture. You know, it's not possible. So we should look at what the alternatives are. But the burden is on the leadership to run the country in such a way that we grow the economy so that the private sector can throw up sustainable jobs. The private sector would have to grow. We pay lip service and say the private sector is the engine of growth. But if it's the engine of growth and it doesn't have petrol to even start, you know, that engine is not going to work. And today, I mean, look at it. Start, stop, start, stop. Look at what has happened. At the beginning of the year, the CD to the dollar was 6 CDs to $1. Today, it's about 14 CDs to $1. So it's wiped off almost 50%, more than 50% of the value of your capital. So if at the beginning of the year, you had 1 million CDs, today the real value of your 1 million CDs is minus 54%. And so businesses suffer. It means all Ghanaian businesses are being set back. And some of them have their capital in bonds and things, and now they're going to get this Baba who has come to, to give everybody a haircut. And so government also has a role in ensuring that the macroeconomy is stable so that private businesses can thrive. It's only when private businesses thrive that will generate enough employment to absorb our young people. And then, if I understood my sister's question properly, I said at the Accra Business School when I spoke last week that don't be afraid to fail. Failure is not the end of your life or your political career. I've lost elections twice. I'm still John Mahama. The knowledge I have is still in my head. The experience I have is with me. And I keep saying that my nation has done well for me. It's made me who I am. We were lucky to go to school at a time when the economy was much better. And so we didn't pay fees. And when we came to university, the government actually paid us to go to university. And so we used to get payee every week to buy our food. We used to get student loans, of course, to buy our books and so on and so forth. Yeah, so when your nation has been so good to you, I won't deny my nation of my services if it is required. And so yes, I run this country. I did it to the best of my ability. Probably we did not communicate as well as we should have the work we were doing because we assumed that Ghanaians could see what we were doing. We built a hospital, school, roads, interchanges. I mean, they were there for Ghanaians to see. But I didn't realize that sometimes propaganda can make people not see. Because when we published our achievements in a book called The Green Book, they said, oh, he went to Dubai and took the pictures and came and showed them, these things are not in Ghana. And yet today, the University of Ghana Medical Center, somebody goes there and says, so it's true that this center is here. I said, yeah, but what did you think? They said, oh, they said it was Photoshop. So in our politics, we have propaganda, we have fake news, and you know that, especially in social media now, somebody will concoct a story and put it up there, and you would think it's true, but it actually is fake news. And so there's a lot of misinformation out there, and so people don't get the right information with which to take decisions. And so sometimes in politics you can lose, not because you've not done your best or because the effects of what you've done are available for people to see, but because people's minds have been influenced by the information that they've been exposed to. So thank you very much. That's the end of the 4 questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Yes. So kindly resume your seat. Thank you so much. We are very grateful. So because of time constraints, let me quickly call on the registrar of the university, Kukwa Nyako, to do the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Eugene. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. His Excellency, John Dramani Mahama, on behalf of the President, his executive team, and the entire management, the entire community of Academic CC University College, we wish to say thank you very much for coming to share your experiences with us. We are so grateful. To Mr. Kalistus Mohammed and the entire team that accompanied His Excellency, we are so grateful for coming and making this event such a success. Professor Fred, if you just join me so that we can do a little something for His Excellency.
All right. We have a little surprise here with our school colors that we think you are so deserving of. So please step up and I'll present this to you.
Let me take it out. Sure.
Yes, we'll be happy if you put it on for us. We have a hat to go with it if you want to.
All right. Thank you so much. We are very grateful, Your Excellency. So we are wrapping up on the program. Right after here, His Excellency would take the lead and we'll all have to sit down while the dignitaries leave, just like what happened when they were coming in. We'll move straight to the make lab, and then His Excellency will have a look at our make lab, our ultra-modern make lab, and then we'll do a tree planting and then some photography. Thank you so much, all of you. So while His Excellency leaves, let's all be upstanding, and then they take their leave.
Oh, Jesus. 1, 2, test the mic.
Try 2.